All righty. Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Keisha Golden Cooper, and I am the Director of Guidance for Teaneck Public Schools. Welcome, welcome, welcome. On this evening, we are going to share a lot of information to our junior parents, and hopefully some students are on as well. But before we get started, I always want to make sure that I bring greetings on behalf of our superintendent, Dr. Irving, our entire executive staff, as well as our building principal, the building principal of Teaneck High School, Mr. Valdez, and the administrative team. As I was kind of saying before we officially got started, I hope all is truly well with you and your family during this time. And always, we are coming up on another busy time of the year. I don't know if there's never a busy time of the year, but personally, we have a little break coming up next week. And then we will continue on with an awesome school year. So my job really is to set the stage and the platform for this evening. And then I'm going to turn it over to two of the fabulous, dynamic, awesome, and all of those great superlative words that I could run off about the school counseling department. We are fortunate to have six dynamic individuals that are there to support you and your children on a daily basis. This evening, we have Ms. Garcia, who is going to share a lot of information with you, as well as Ms. Fleischer, both, again, two out of six awesome school counselors. Both have a wealth of experience and knowledge that I lean towards oftentimes, and it's been awesome experience working with them. So I'm going to stop talking because I got a whole lot of information to share, and I will come back at the end to facilitate any questions that you may have. Please feel free to drop your questions as the evening goes on in the chat, and I'll do my best to monitor and then make sure I circle back to answer your questions. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to the dynamic duo for the evening, Ms. Fleischer and Ms. Garcia.
Thank you, Ms. Cooper. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here. We know this is a very busy time. We hope again that everybody in your families are well. Tonight, our goal is to give you an overview of the college admissions process and some of the things that you and your children might want to be doing, starting to think about for the next few months to get, yourself started with the process, okay? And so that you don't feel like it is too overwhelming. Try to demystify the admissions process for you a little bit. We will have more of these presentations senior year, both for the process and also for financial aid. So don't feel like we didn't go too much into detail there, and we're always available. The next slide is going to show you all of our email addresses, and the last one I think includes our phone numbers. So whenever you have a question, feel free to call us. We're going to be here to help you and your child get through this process, and we hope to alleviate the stress that goes with it, so that you enjoy the journey. I have a 22-year-old, and I remember that being a fun time, in searching for colleges that fit her personality, her learning style, and her goals. So we hope that you will have a similar experience. Ms. Fleischer, can you go to the next slide? Okay, so this is where our emails are, all of our names, and in the last slide, I believe our phone numbers are. So we are here to help you. Reach out to us, and we will try to do our best to make this process a fun one for you and your children. Next slide. So this is an overview of what we are going to go over today. Things to do. It doesn't mean you have to do everything, this month, next month. So we're not trying to stress you out. We do get a lot of inquiries from parents around this time, junior year, feeling like, what can I do to get started so that I am ahead of the game? So don't feel like you have to do everything right away. Just trying to give you an overview of some of the things that you can work on when you have some time. And they include thinking about senior year courses, which we will be selecting in a few months, thinking about meeting graduation requirements, and your plans for majors, looking at what colleges you might be thinking about for your children, for yourself, and what courses they might prefer to see on your transcript, see if there's anything left that you haven't taken. Recommendation letters, we always say, this year, and it's good to know it at this time, is probably a good year to ask for teacher letter of recommendations. So knowing that before you're asking them, we don't need you to ask them tomorrow, will help children, or I hate to say children, young adults, your youth, develop good relationships with their junior year teachers. And Ms. Fleischer will say a little bit more about that process later. You probably started thinking about SATs or ACTs, whether or not your child will be taking one or the other. Later on, we'll talk a little bit about the difference, and personal statements. That's a journey, that process. So starting early, jotting down some notes, brainstorming ideas. And again, we'll talk a little bit more later. Some of you may have children who are athletes at home and might be thinking about playing sports in college at a competitive level. So we're going to introduce you to the NCAA clearinghouse if you're not familiar with it a little later also. And Naviance. We use Naviance a lot with the college process. So I know some of the juniors are already using it. So we are going to give you a little bit more information about it in case you haven't started using it. And applying for financial aid and scholarships. Okay, next slide, please. Thank you. So in terms of selecting classes for next year, make sure that your child reviews their graduation requirements. We do that with them too, but sometimes when they pick their electives, they might forget that they have not yet taken a fine or performing arts or a financial literacy. So thinking about that early will help them not be disappointed when they meet with us and we say, well, you need to take this class because you haven't yet taken it. And also considering the schools that they're applying to, some very competitive schools want to see more than what's required for graduation. So some schools might want to see 3 years of a foreign language, for example. So knowing what your schools require will help you select your senior year courses. I'm not going to go over this in detail, but real quickly, for graduation, you need 4 years of English, 4 years of math, 3 years of science, 3 years of history, one world and 2 US, 4 years of physical education and health, 1 year of world language, but most of our students graduate with 2 because most 4-year colleges require at least 2. And like I said earlier, sometimes they prefer to see 3 or more. And then this is the part where senior year, you want to be really careful. You need at least 1 year of performing arts. Some kids don't like performing arts, fine or performing arts, so they leave it for senior year. You have to have it in order to graduate. 1 year of practical career or technology, and that could be a culinary arts class, a business class, or a technology class, and 1 year financial literacy. And we help the students make sure that they have it. Just sometimes they're disappointed that they made plans to take X, Y, and Z, and now they have one less slot to take. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, a little bit about the different types of colleges. Some of your children may know that they want to go directly to a 4-year college. Some of them may be thinking, maybe I want to start at a 2-year college and then transfer, or get a 2-year degree and go to work. So a little bit about the differences. A lot of what we're going to talk about today applies mostly to 4-year colleges, but for 2-year colleges, the application is pretty simple. We usually start focusing on 2-year colleges in February of your senior year. They don't require transcripts until after you graduate. They don't require SATs for admissions or ACTs, but sometimes they look at them for placement if you scored above their benchmark. Okay. They don't require letters of recommendations for most programs. And for Bergen Community College, students who rank in the top 15% of their class. And I think maybe Ms. Fleischer might be going over this a little later, so pardon me if I'm being a little repetitious. By the end of their junior year, qualify for the New Jersey STARS program, which gives them the first 2 years of college at the community college, at Bergen Community College, tuition free. Okay. And then for four-year colleges, that is a lot more involved. There are a lot of deadlines, and that's where it gets confusing. One college can have various deadlines, so you have to decide when are you applying, and all your colleges may have different deadlines. We send
Ms. Garcia, your volume.
next slide, please. I think somebody told me that I went mute. Okay, I don't know what happened.
Do you want to go over the last part again? Because I think that it went mute when you were talking about the four-year schools.
Okay, I can go over that, but I'm good now. You can hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, that's weird. Good. All right. So I'm going to review the four-year schools again, because I don't know exactly where I went mute. So four-year colleges, the process is a little more involved, and that's where we're going to emphasize tonight, to try to demystify that process. But a little bit of the gist is there are a lot of deadlines, and that can be overwhelming. One school can have more than one deadline. We'll explain more in detail later. They require transcripts and letters of recommendations, almost all of them, but there are a few that don't. We, the counselors, will send the transcripts. We have a process for students to inform us, parents to give consent, and we send letters of recommendations that are available. So the student has their responsibility in terms of requesting them. And then the students part is they have to do the application and submit it, usually online nowadays, and any essays that are required, as well as any fees and their SAT scores if they decide to send SAT scores. Okay. Next slide, please. Thank you. How do you decide? This is the part that can be fun and very stressful. How do you decide where you're going to school? How do you help your child decide where are you going to apply? Okay, Naviance is going to be a great tool. I know we're going to talk about it a little later, but all of these criteria that I'm going to go over, almost all of them, you can actually do a college search in Naviance. It'll give you results, and then you look through them. You can save the search. You can actually save some of the colleges, the ones that you like, so that you can go back to them. So we want to consider your child's personality, your child's strengths, your child's weaknesses, and in doing so, compare them to, you know, what you might think would be a good fit for them. Do you want them to be in a big school, a large school, a small school, medium-sized school? Some kids will be fine in any size school, and some kids are going to thrive in a very small school, and others will thrive in a very large school and feel flustered in a small school. So getting to, you know, having conversations. This journey is about communicating with your child and having conversations, and they can always come to us. We have conversations with them too, when they need a little bit more guidance too. Where do you want your child? This one I love, because I always talk to kids, and when I ask where do you want to go, they're like, oh, anywhere. But then when we talk to parents, not so much in a lot of cases. So having those conversations junior year can be very helpful, so that you can start at least negotiating, you know, how far is acceptable. Public versus private. This is important, especially for parents, because of the cost factor. So public colleges tend to be less expensive, but we say don't rule out private colleges, because even though they are more expensive, a lot of private colleges, not all, have big endowments, and some are a lot more generous and have more money to offer than even public colleges. So it doesn't mean that you're always going to pay less at a public school. It depends on the student. It depends on the financial background of the family and the academic achievements of the student. Okay, but consider both. We don't have here, but in-state versus out of state also is a cost factor. I always encourage my students to at least apply to one or two in-state schools that they would consider going to, because if they're eligible for New Jersey state aid and they leave the state, they don't get that aid. So having those conversations, I know a lot of our New Jersey kids are like, I want to go out of state, gotta go out of state, but it doesn't hurt to just, apply to one or two schools, because when it comes down to how much it's going to cost, it is good to make a good decision, because I don't like to see students go into, take $25,000 in debt a year. Okay, maybe over college, all 4 years, but a year, that's a lot of money. And then some other criteria to consider. Do they offer, if your child knows exactly what they want to study, it's a good idea to make sure that the schools they're applying to offer that program, or a variety of programs they might be considering, excuse me. The admissions criteria is important too. A lot of kids want to apply to a lot of the colleges that they're familiar with, and it takes a lot of time. So knowing, and we're going to talk a little bit more later about having a nice diverse group of colleges, so that you can have some schools that are, I feel like I'm jumping the gun, but reaches, safeties, and target schools, and we'll talk about that a little bit more, is also very helpful. Okay. Definitely, consider what extracurricular activities are available at the schools you're considering, because if you love to play volleyball, for example, or, maybe not volleyball, something that is harder to find, you probably want to make sure a school has some opportunity to engage in that. Consider the school's graduation rate. So some schools, they're maybe easy to get into, but you want to make sure your son or daughter is going to have a good chance of graduating. I know most kids graduate at 4 years, but at least a good chance of graduating within 4 or 5 years, because that's going to be more money for you to pay. And there are some colleges that have very low graduation rates. So I personally would consider that too. And for our students at Teaneck, when I talk to them, for most of them, diversity is very important. So considering that when you're selecting your groups of colleges is helpful too. And some students may have, some of your children may have disabilities. So there are a lot of different services offered at schools. Learning a lot about what support services are offered at colleges if your child has a disability should also be considered before applying. Okay. Next slide, please. Okay, campus visits. Nowadays with COVID, it's sometimes hard to get out there, but there are a lot of movement to do the virtual tours. This website here, youvisit.com, has thousands of virtual tours. And when you can, get to campus on time, definitely, try to do that with your children. Try to visit as many of these specific places to get a good sense of the campus environment and what it's like, to be a student there, talk to students. If you can arrange to sit in a class, sometimes that's a possibility if you arrange it ahead of time. And some schools offer programs like being a student for the day. So that can always be very helpful when it is doable. The next slide, please. Okay, another opportunity that's a lot easier than going to visit the school that we offer is meeting with college reps through us, through Teaneck High School. They used to, before the pandemic, come physically to our school and meet with our students and give a short presentation about their schools, their programs, academic, extracurricular, financial aid, and then answer any questions the students had. Nowadays with the pandemic, almost everything is turning virtual, but some of them come in person. Our students can check who is coming by looking in their Naviance account. It's also announced in the morning announcements during homeroom. And in the college, in the classroom of the class of 2023 college and career Google Classroom, and we've included the code here in case you are not in it yet or the student's not in it yet. And when they check in Naviance, that screen that you see right there, this is what they would see today. I believe Stony Brook University will be here on Monday. And I say here, that could be virtual. Dominican College on Tuesday, and Meridian University on Wednesday, the following Wednesday. So, and then if you click on show more in Naviance, it'll show you all the future ones that are already scheduled that may not be in the next few days. In addition to that, there are college fairs. There's a link right here also for national college fairs. A lot of them sometimes are virtual now during the pandemic, but you can still get a lot out of them. We just had a virtual one, I think it was last week, and we may have one in the spring. Okay, next slide, please. Oh, and I forgot, checking your email. A lot of important things come through emails, especially junior and senior year. So please encourage them to check their email if possible daily. Application forms. So there are a variety of online application forms when you're applying to college. The most common one is the Common Application. Over 900 colleges accept the Common App. So nowadays, almost every student is completing the Common App. Another one that's a little popular is the Coalition Application. Not as many schools accept it. So most of our students do the Common Application. You can create an account now and start becoming familiar with it, but you shouldn't apply to college until at the earliest summer after junior year, but usually it's in the fall of senior year. It's starting in the fall because every student is different. And there is a common Black college application that 61 HBCUs accept, and they actually do it a little differently. Instead of paying separate fees, you pay one fee of $20 to apply to as many colleges as you choose, and you pick your top 4 choices. And then there's colleges like Rutgers that do not accept any of these common applications. You have to apply through their website, and everything is directly on their website. Students should try to complete as few applications as possible because it's very repetitive. So if your school accepts the Common App, why apply on their website? Only the ones that don't accept like the Common App, then I would do on their website. Okay. Next slide, please. Okay, so I mentioned earlier that a lot of colleges have more than one deadline. This slide is to try to give you a sense of that. So first I want to make sure everybody understands early decision because that's the most complicated one. Early decision is when a student knows 100 and maybe at least 10% that if they got into that college, that's where they would want to go. Okay. And in addition to that, that the parents know that financially it is a doable situation. And there is something called the net price calculator that can help parents decide if financially it is a doable situation. I would encourage anybody considering early decision to do the net price calculator for that college before doing the early decision admissions plan. And because early decision means that the parent and the student are committing to that school if they are accepted. And in that commitment, you are agreeing to withdraw all of your other applications if you've applied once you're accepted. And they usually have very early deadlines like November 1st, November 15th. Okay. It is great for those kids who know exactly where they want to go. The parents have looked at the financial considerations because the acceptance rates for some of the very selective schools in early decision tends to be slightly higher, not way higher, but slightly higher. And you want to make sure that you visited the school if possible more than once because you are committing to it. Okay. And Early action is similar, but it is not binding. You apply early, and colleges promise that they will give you a decision earlier than the kids who don't make that early deadline. And those deadlines usually are in November, sometimes December. Okay. So that's a good one to do. You're not, committing to anything. You're just committing to, I'm going to do the work early. I'm going to apply early so that I can know early. And you don't have to commit and decide what school you're going to until May 1st. And the deadlines vary from, I think I said that, from October to December. And regular decision, like early action, is non-binding, and the deadlines vary. They're usually like January through maybe March, sometimes even April. And you don't decide until May 1st which school you're attending. Okay. Even if the deadlines are late and they're regular or rolling, students can apply early. If the school's deadline is March 1st, you can apply in January or even December. It's just, that's their deadline, and they're going to tell everybody who is accepted at the same time. And like I said, some schools may have all three of these. That's where it gets really confusing. Okay. As long as you know the difference between each, then when the application, you indicate how you're applying. Next slide, please. Okay. So I mentioned a little bit earlier about selecting the types of colleges so that your student has a good chance of getting in. This chart gives you an idea. You want most of your students' colleges, let's say they're applying to 8 schools. So you will want at least 4 of those schools to be in the target range. Those are schools that your child has the SATs or GPA in the average range of students that were accepted to that school. So there is a decent chance that they're going to get in. It's never a guarantee because they look at so much more. They look, like I said earlier, they look at the extracurricular activities, the essays, the letters, everything. But at least the child is in that average range for the type of students that they admit. And then if they were applying to 8 schools, maybe 2 could be reaches and 2 safeties. Okay. And the reaches would be schools that I'm not in the target range. They tend to accept students who have stronger academic credentials than I do, but an average is an average. There's always going to be people that are lower and higher. So I may be one of those, right? And the same with the safety. I am beyond the target range. There is a good chance I'm going to get in. Even though this may not be my favorite school, I know that if I don't get into my other schools, I can go there and I will be fine. Okay. That would be a safety. And the next slide, the next slide is a picture of a scattergram. And basically that's what we use to help our students see visually, what are my chances of getting in? And you can find this in Naviance. Parents, you can find it in Naviance. Students can find it in Naviance. This one is for Rutgers University, Newark. And the dotted lines show you the average GPA and the average SAT scores on a 1600 scale of the students who applied and were admitted. So what we do is we have the students look at their GPA and their SAT scores and plot themselves. And if their neighbors are red, most of their neighbors, then that would be a reach school. If all of their neighbors are green and they're beyond that dotted line above it, to the top or to the right of it, then that would be a safety school. And then if they're really close to that dotted line and some neighbors are green and some neighbors are red, then that would be a target school. Okay. So I love to use this because I don't, kids will say, can I get in here? And we never know. We never know because they factor in so many things, but we can visually say, well, let's see, statistically speaking, what are your chances? So I encourage you all to use that. Next slide, please. Okay. Getting organized will help your child save time. So please encourage your child to use Naviance. And the top picture shows you what happens when you start putting colleges in Naviance. So you do your search, you look at your scattergrams, you start adding some schools. And then you start seeing, once you add these schools, you see, is it on the Common App or not? The deadlines, by clicking, you could see this one has more than one deadline. It tells you what the rolling deadline is, what the early action deadline is, to help students plan, okay? And when filling out the application, we encourage you to please be very careful, read and reread your directions and your answers, proofread your essays, well, Ms. Fleischer is going to talk about that later, but always have somebody proofread your essays, and start thinking about both the recommendations and the SAT scores. The SATs, are you taking SATs or ACTs? Next slide, please. Okay, so the application components, okay? I've mentioned a lot, so it's kind of repetitive, but in terms of your high school grades, colleges are going to see your transcript, and there they will see your grades and the rigor of your courses, that they consider both of those highly. If colleges require standardized test scores, they will consider those. Of course, the application essays, the extracurricular activities, leadership skills within those activities, and letters of recommendations, and any circumstance that's different for you than someone else, and that you can include in your essay. Next slide, please. Okay, this slide pretty much talks about what is in your transcript, which I already mentioned. It includes your GPA, in addition to your score, your classes and grades, your grade point average, both on a weighted scale and unweighted scale. And just a reminder that the school counselor sends your transcript. A couple of schools that don't require transcripts are Rutgers, Penn State, and the California and North Carolina state systems. They require something called the academic self-report. It's a little early for that. We will help guide you through that. Next slide, please. Okay, SATs. So this class may be required to take SATs by a lot of colleges, but the last two classes, most colleges have gone SAT optional because of the pandemic. But you should plan on taking it because you may not know until a little bit later. So a little bit of general information about SATs. It is a $55 cost. There is no more essays, so that shouldn't be on there. And if you are eligible, if your child is eligible for free reduced lunch, they should see their counselor so that we can give them a fee waiver when they're ready to take the test, or ready to register, better yet. Next tests are in December, March, May, and June. And then there's also August and fall tests. Next slide, please. The ACT, also a college admissions exam. They just compete with each other. I usually like to compare them to like Coke and Pepsi. It kind of depends on your taste buds. With these two tests, it depends on the student's learning style. So sometimes kids will take two practice tests and decide which one they think they might do better on. And the fees are a little bit different. We went a little bit ahead. But this chart is basically
apologies, I'm trying to get it back, but a little bit of technical difficulties.
That's okay. You can stay right there if you can't go back. This slide pretty much compares the two, the Pepsi and the Coke. Okay, there we go. So you can see there are different costs. Sometimes the same months they're offered. Sometimes they're offered at different months. So the next months for the ACT are December, February, and April. But they're also offered in June, July, September, and October. And again, fee waivers are available for students who are eligible for free or reduced lunch. Okay, a main difference is that on the ACT, the calculator is allowed throughout the math section, and on the on the SAT, only in parts of the math. Okay. Next slide. Okay. So this is just a comparison chart in terms of time. They're about the same time. The big difference in terms of scoring is the point system that they use. So most of you are familiar with the SAT. That's a 1600 scale, and the ACT is a 36 point scale. They both include math, reading, English. The ACT includes a science section, so that's another major difference. And that pretty much covers my part. Ms. Fleischer will continue. And once again, thank you for being here. And don't stress, because we are going to keep providing information like this and helping you guys through this process.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Garcia. Apologies to everyone. I am not accustomed to Zoom, and I'm doing this on my kid's MacBook, so it's a little glitchy. Anyway, all right, so something important to know about is if your child has an IEP, a 504, or ESL, English as a second language, they may be eligible for accommodations. So there is a form for the SAT, a consent form that you can request from your counselor, or that your counselor may give to your child, that needs to be signed and submitted. And then it is up to the testing company to decide whether the criteria for eligibility has been met. So it's not our decision. We submit the documentation, and then it's up to the SAT or the ACT testing company to decide whether the criteria is sufficient for them to get the accommodations. So in terms of sending scores, you will find that unfortunately with College Board and the SAT and the ACT, everything kind of has a price. So it does cost money, and I'll talk a little bit more in the next slide. Actually, no, it's here at the bottom, that basically it does cost money to send scores to colleges, except for the first 4 score reports. Those are free up to 9 days after the SAT. For the ACT, it seems they don't really have a time limit. You get 4 free score reports. But if you want them sent after that point, they do charge you. Now, the exception to this is if you are qualifying for a fee waiver. So basically, if you're free or reduced lunch. So if you are not sure if your child is eligible for free or reduced lunch, there is a form on the school website. If you're not sure where to find that form, just email your counselor and they can send it to you where you can apply. And being eligible for free or reduced lunch also allows next year for your child to apply to almost every college for free. So it is a very helpful thing to be eligible for in terms of saving some money in this whole process. Basically, right now, you have a lot of time, which is great. But next year, when your child is applying to colleges, make sure that you allow some time for the score to be sent to the college. So you don't want, if the deadline is November 1st, you don't want to be requesting the score be sent there on November 1st. You want to make sure that there's time for the score to get to the college. The first bullet there is important, that some colleges will let you save money by self-reporting the scores. So for example, on the Common Application, there's a spot where you could write in the scores and they will accept it from there. And you don't have to pay anything to get it submitted unless you go to that school. So you can save money. You just have to look at what way the college is going to accept the scores. At the bottom, we have the websites for College Board, and we have the website for ACT. Letters of recommendation. So this, as Ms. Garcia said, can be very significant in terms of your child's application. Getting the viewpoint of teachers or coaches or your counselor on your child can help the college admissions officers to get a better sense of who they are beyond just what's written on paper in terms of their transcript and their test scores. So all of the counselors will write a letter for your child. So you don't have to worry about that. But what your child should do before leaving for the summer is find 2 teachers that they ask a letter from. So it's important to do this before they leave for the summer so that the teacher has the summer to write it. And also keep in mind that some teachers, have limits as to how many they will write. So you don't want your child going to the teacher and then finding that the teacher has already taken on too many letters. So again, a good time to ask, I would say, is maybe May or June. And junior year teachers are good. You can go back to sophomore year. I wouldn't recommend going all the way back to freshman year because the college will wonder why so far back. The other thing is generally you want to go with core teachers. The exception would be like if you're planning to go into art or music or something like that, you'll probably want to get a letter from your art or music teacher. But generally speaking, it's good to get a letter from core English, math, science, social studies, foreign language, those teachers. Character reference letters. Those can be very helpful. As I mentioned earlier, it could be from a coach, a supervisor at a job, clergy, someone who knows your child outside of the classroom setting and can speak to who they are as a person in the world. It would not be like an uncle per se. It would be someone that they've worked with who they know that's not a family member. Now, in order for your counselor to write the letter of recommendation, the student needs to fill out what's called the student brag sheet, which is located in Naviance. And we will go over with the students how to find the brag sheet. It's something that I recommend they get done over the summer, and the directions on how to find it are on this slide. My advice is that students complete it on a Google Doc and copy and paste their responses onto the brag sheet, because sometimes Naviance has gotten glitchy and I've had students lose what they wrote in their brag sheet. So it's very important for them to have a backup copy. That's basically it. So it's important for them to know which teachers they want to ask and to ask them before the school year ends. So the essay or personal statement. Most four-year colleges are going to require this. The Common Application has an essay. Some of the students will work on this essay in English class, some won't, but there are lots of resources. We're available, the counselors are available to help, teachers are available to help, and they have a lot of time to write this. Oftentimes, they might work on it over the summer and then bring it in with them in the fall, and we can help them with it. What I tell students is that this essay is your chance to tell the college a little bit about yourself in your own words. So it can be about something serious. It can be about a struggle you've gone through. It can be about someone who's inspired you. The Common App provides prompts you can choose from. For the last few years, they've given prompts, but they've also said you can write about whatever you want. I would not recommend turning in, a social studies essay about, what caused World War II. It should be something about who you are. So it can be sort of a light and fun essay about, why you like a certain brand of toothpaste. It doesn't have to be serious. The idea is, though, that you give a sense of you and that it's your voice. It shouldn't sound like mom and dad wrote it. It should sound like the students. So again, the student should have someone read it over, and they can have someone brainstorm with them to help them flesh out their ideas. But colleges can tell if it's not a student's voice because they've run enough of these to know. So now this is getting into a little bit more about what's available specifically at the high school in terms of preparing for college. So we've already spoken about Naviance. And Ms. Garcia has gone over this quite a bit, so I'm not going to spend too much time. But something that wasn't mentioned is we have something on Naviance called Career Interest Profiler. Some of your children may have already looked at it. It's a great way if they're still figuring out what they want to do. And it's fine if they start college not knowing what they want to do after college. That definitely was me. It's fine. But if they say, I don't even know where to start, the Career Interest Profiler is a great tool where they take a quiz, and there's different kinds of quizzes also. There's personality quizzes, there's interest quizzes, all on Naviance that can help them narrow their interests and see what fields might be good for them to go into. And for the most part, which college you go to you don't need to know the career. The exception might be nursing or engineering or pharmacy. Those are or architecture maybe. Those are the big ones that I can think of. But for most fields, like if you want to be a doctor, if you want to be a lawyer, if you know, most fields, you don't need to know when you start college. But the career interest profiler is a great way to get the wheels turning just thinking about it. So again, Ms. Garcia kind of went through this where you can look at deadlines. It's very early to do that now. I would say this is something you would do over the summer. You can start on the college applications. My personal philosophy is the more you can get done in the summer, the easier your fall will be. So summer is a good time to start checking out deadlines, deciding the colleges, starting to apply. So in terms of how we process applications, now again, this is very early. This is going to be basically in the fall that this starts happening, but there are online forms. The parent needs to sign this online parent consent form that basically gives us permission to send materials where the student has requested them sent. And this transcript request form, which is again filled out by the student, telling us where they want their materials to be sent. And as we said before, the brag sheet. So basically, we say we want 10 school days prior to the deadline, so we have time to get all the materials together, to write the letter of recommendation, and all of that. So financial aid. Now, this is very important. There is something called the FAFSA, which stands for the Federal Application for Student Aid, but you can think of it as the free application for student aid, because the key word is obviously free. Now, there's a myth out there, I make too much money, I don't need to fill out the FAFSA because I'm not going to get anything. That's actually not true. I mean, for some people that could happen, but generally speaking, people can qualify for different types of scholarships by filling out the FAFSA. Additionally, work study, which is a great program, students qualify for that through the FAFSA. So even if they're not given straight out grant money, they could be given work study, which is where they can work and get the money towards their tuition. And often those jobs allow them, like working in the library where you're mostly studying and just checking people out with books. So there are ways you can actually get money for college and study at the same time. Or sometimes work study is something related to their careers. So it's a very good opportunity, and you really can't get that without doing the FAFSA. Some schools, in addition to the FAFSA, have something called the CSS profile, and that is actually through College Board, so it does cost money. Again, unless you qualify financially for a waiver. Some students who don't qualify for a fee waiver do in fact qualify for a lower price or for free on the CSS profile, so you'll want to check it out. Most schools do not require the CSS profile, but some of the most competitive colleges do, like the Ivy League schools, Johns Hopkins, Stevens. So you do want to check and see if your school requires the CSS profile. In terms of scholarships, where you can find them, you can check out, there's a couple websites here. There's plenty of online resources for finding scholarships. We also post them on the Google page. But what I tell students right now is that the main focus should be on keeping their grades up. And if they're taking the SAT or ACT, to focus on that and to focus on their extracurriculars, because the most money they're going to get is going to come directly from the college and from financial aid. After they finish that process, that's the time to really start hunting for those scholarships. They basically supplement the money that you get from college and from financial aid. So NJ stars, Ms. Garcia had mentioned that. Basically, if you are in the top 15% of your class at the end of junior year or at the end of senior year, you qualify for a program called NJ Stars. So that is basically where you get to go to Bergen Community College for free. And then if you move on and choose to go to another college in New Jersey, I'm not sure if Princeton is part of that, but most of the other schools in New Jersey, you get some tuition money towards that. Something that's not listed here that's worth knowing is that there is a program that allows students whose families make under a certain income to go to BCC for free. So that's another program to look into. And it doesn't matter, as long as you graduate high school, it doesn't really matter what the GPA is. So scholarship information, again, there's merit aid, which is based on the college giving you money based on your grades or your SATs or extracurriculars. Need-based is based obviously on need. So you'll want to continue in terms of scholarships, checking the emails that come in, checking the Google Classroom, and using the search tools that I mentioned earlier. And there are lots out there. Personally, I like CAPEX and Going Merry. Other counselors may have their favorites. There's a lot out there. NCAA. So if your child is thinking of playing sports for scholarship in college at the collegiate level, it's very, very competitive, but if that's what they want to do, and, you know, I would say talk with the coach, make a highlight video. So you would talk to the coach about the athletic piece of it. But in terms of the academic piece, you do need to qualify academically. So the student should talk to their counselor, make sure they're taking the right courses, and register online with the eligibility center. So it is very, very important that the student make the counselor aware that they're thinking of doing that. So Ms. Garcia has kind of gone over already how the college visits work, but just a quick overview of the process, just a review. This is basically what you do. And there will be, once you signed up, the student should wait for a confirmation email and further instructions from the guidance office from our secretary, Ms. Moore. So how do parents help? I mean, I would say the number one thing parents can do is be supportive. I do think it is important to talk with them about, you know, what your expectations are in terms of location, if there are financial constraints, you know, that kind of conversation, but I wouldn't necessarily limit where they apply, because as Ms. Garcia said, you don't always know how much money you're going to get, but I would say use the net price calculator as a way to help you try to get some sort of estimate. So basically it is really important to have a plan. You can make a calendar with them of the deadlines, display it in a common area. And again, just be supportive and understand that the student is feeling overwhelmed. So most likely, I mean, maybe there are some who consider it a breeze, but most of my students really do struggle with this. So the best thing you can do is really be supportive and, you know, be a sounding board. And if you have any questions, definitely we're here, reach out to us. So once again, this is all of the counselors, this is a list of all of us. And this is a list of our Google Classroom again. That is really important. Now note that your child has to join. They can only join through their THS email account. So your child needs to join, but you can always look on with them to see what's going on. So I think that pretty much sums up our presentation. I went a little bit quickly because I know it's 8 o'clock now, but I guess Ms. Golden Cooper can come back on and Ms. Garcia, and we can open it up to questions.
There are a couple questions in the chat. If you can just take a look at it. I'm having a little technical difficulty on my end, so I'll be right back on.
Okay, I see one question here about how you can get the scores. I take it they're talking about the SAT scores or the ACT scores. The way you get that is the student will make an account, and when the scores are ready, they will be in the account for the student to access.
And I see a question that says 9 days only, you won't know the score is what the score is at this time. And that is true. For the SAT, you don't know the score by the time you have to decide whether or not you're sending the free ones. If you,
it's
and
tricky.
If your child is eligible for a fee waiver, they can send the scores afterwards for free. If you're paying, you're going to have to weigh the pros and cons of, you know, sending them without knowing, or waiting and paying after you know them.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. I mean, as I said, the College Board is technically a nonprofit, but kind of acts like a profit. And it does seem a little bit tricky that they're asking you to submit it before you even know. So unfortunately, that's a decision you kind of will have to make if it's worth waiting until you get the scores and just paying the money, or if you want to send it ahead of time. A lot of colleges, with that said, do something called super scoring, where they'll take your best scores. So you could always ask the colleges if they super score. And in those cases, you could just send it and save the money sending it. Some other questions I see here.
The PSAT
The
scores.
PSAT scores.
The seminar.
Okay, so there you go. So should they take the SAT several times? I mean, I think it's a very case, I'm sorry, I don't mean to be dominating, Ms. Garcia, feel free to jump in. But I think it's a very case by case situation in terms of how many times. I would not recommend taking it 1 month and then taking it again a month later. You want to have time to say, let's say you take it in March. You might want to take the SAT in March. And if you decide you want to take the ACT also, maybe you take that in, April, and then you decide which one you did better and you take that one in August. Now they have different dates. I'm just using those months as an example. I would recommend, if you're not sure whether your child should take the SAT or ACT, both have, well, they already took the PSAT, so they should be getting those back so they'll get a sense of how they did. But the ACT has a free test that they can take on their website. And so they can give it to themselves under time conditions. Obviously, it's not going to be exactly the same, but it should give them some sense. And they can decide, do I want to try taking both, or do I just want to focus on one? The only thing I would recommend against is don't try to study for both at the same time. So if you're going to take both, study for the SAT, take the SAT, study for the ACT, take the ACT. And then if you want to take whichever one you did better on, study for that one and take that one.
Great questions. There was a question whether or not the school will provide SAT prep. Plans are underway now. We are, I do have a proposal waiting. We're just looking at staffing and seeing how that will be, how that will kind of materialize. I'm not sure if there are any other questions. Yes, this was recorded. So in a couple of days, it will be posted on our school counseling YouTube channel. There are a few other videos there as well. And the link will also be posted in the students' Google Classroom for this from the school counseling department. I just want to make an additional mention that when students, you're welcome, when students are taking the standardized scores, we also look to utilize them for New Jersey State graduation assessment requirements. So they also, serve dual purpose. So we utilize PSAT, SAT, as well as, well, we haven't done it yet, but as well as the NJSLA scores. So in this junior class, the state is still in decision-making process of what the graduation assessment requirements will be. But we will ensure that all of our students are ready to and prepared to be able to meet that requirement.
Since there were several questions about the SATs and PSATs, I just want to point out, in case some families aren't looking at the chat, that I posted the Khan Academy website. They offer personalized free practice based on your students' PSAT results once you have them. And all you have to do is follow a few steps to link those two accounts. They work in collaboration with College Board, and it's free.
Yep.
Awesome. I also wrote that there is also free test prep on the ACT site. So you can do both. And again, it really depends on the student in terms of which one is better. I've seen students who have done better on the SAT, some have done better on the ACT. A lot of them have done pretty much the same on both. So, it's really a matter of preference. And it is a myth that colleges prefer one over the other. We often hear that colleges like SAT better, but that's because we're on the East Coast and College Board is based in Princeton, New Jersey. I went to high school in Minnesota. ACT is based out of Iowa. We all took the ACT. So, and a few of us took both. So it's really, the colleges are fine with either one.
Absolutely. And a final note regarding the SAT, the Teaneck High School is a testing center. So just as you are looking to register when it is time, register early, and just be mindful that we are a testing center, and we will, make sure we have that information for you. Again, being mindful of time, this is a vigorous process. You offer group sessions to help students navigate through it, some additional help to teach them. Yes. The school counselors do work with students, both individual group. It just also depends on the students' needs and what the dynamics of the students' a possible group would be. But yes, this is our main goal, is to help support our students through, not just through the academic portion of, being at Teaneck High School, but and beyond. So that is yes, and yes to that question. So again, I want to be mindful of time. It is 8:08. I really want to thank everyone for joining. I'm not sure if there are any additional questions, but all of the school counselors' information or their phone numbers the extensions are listed there. Their emails are the first letter of their first name and their last name. So it'd be like dbook@teaneckschools.org and so forth and so on. And we are definitely here to help you in every and any way. So thank you guys so much. We'll hang on for about a minute or two, unless if there are any final questions, you can put it in the chat. And if not, take care. Hope all is well with you and yours. From our school counseling family to all of our Teaneck family, we are so happy to be back in the building. Students' faces have been awesome to see, and the hustle and bustle of, the eyes. Thank you, Ms. Garcia. And they smile very well. But it's great to have your students back in the building. The hustle and bustle of the counseling office I love to see it. I love the energy. And we look forward to a great remainder of this school year and supporting you and your child through the next year as we are preparing them to go off into the world. So again, thank you. Take care. Be well.